Let's get started. I'm going to be talking about the history of Medinat Israel, how we got this beautiful gift that we have today, uh, the eighth most powerful country in the world, beacon of light for the nations, a country that has contributed so much in every aspect to humanity. And the country that was rated like eighth place in terms of happiness, despite being a country surrounded by enemies. Um, so how this incredible miracle happened, took place. So I would like to start, by defining a little bit what is Judaism. This is really essential because to understand the Zionist movement and Medinat Israel and how it came about, we need to understand what Judaism is and what Judaism is not. I'm sure that if I ask you, or if I ask anyone, what is Judaism, the first word. Would you please put mute in the microphone? I think that will be a little easier. If I ask you what Judaism is, the definition of Judaism in one word, probably most of you would say that Judaism is a religion, and that's not technically correct. And our enemies have been using this definition of religion to attack us and to try to delegitimize the state of Israel. So Judaism is not a religion, and I will explain to you why this definition is so important. We are not a religion, we are a nation. And there is a big difference between a religion and a nation. A religion does not require to have a state of its own. You have the Catholic religion or the Muslim religion, although the Catholic, they have their the Vatican, the Holy City, the Vatican, but they don't say all Catholics should live and should go back and live back in Vatican. Muslims, they go to Mecca for peregrination, but they don't say we Muslims belong to this land, specifically to one land. They don't have that. We are a nation because we have these basic elements that makes for a nation, and the most important of them is that we have a land. A nation is defined by having a common land, having a common language, having a common history, and having a common law. So we do have our law, the Torah is our constitution. We do have a common language, which is Hebrew. We do have a common history that we repeat all the time, and we replay it every Pesach, Bezrat Hashem, very soon. And we do have a land that we never forgot, and we always had a claim or the desire to come back. Okay, when our enemies say that Zionism is racism, or many of our enemies, they say, well, why the Medinat Israel, why the state of Israel gives citizenship only to whoever is Jewish? We don't have this, that, almost anywhere that a religion that you have is a condition to adopt certain nationality. So they use this against us, but definitely this is not who we are. We are not a religion, we are a nation. As such, Zionism is and has always been a mitzvah for us. It's part of the nebuot, the prophecies of our Torah. In our Torah, Borei Olam said we have a pact with Borei Olam. This is what makes us very special people. We have a pact with him. And in this pact, it says that the election of Am Israel, being the chosen people, will never change. Borei Olam will always be faithful to this pact. We will always be the people of God. But there are some things that are conditional in this pact, and one of them is our right for the land of Israel. More than once, many times, the Torah says, like in the Shema Israel, okay, that v'ishtachavitem lahem, if we v'sartem ba'avatem Elohim achirim v'ishtachavitem lahem, if we leave, your microphone's off and your video's off, if we leave Borei Olam and we worship other idols, then Borei Olam bechara af Adonai bachem me'asaret hashamayim, then Borei Olam will make our land barren, and we will have to leave. So exile is perhaps one of the worst punishments, and Borei Olam says, you can be in the land of Israel if you fulfill my mitzvot. At the moment that you don't, then you will be expelled from the land of Israel. It's in the Torah, explicitly. Now, there is something else in the Torah, something very extremely important and extremely relevant for our days, extremely contemporary. And that is some pesukim, a few pesukim, very easy to remember, in Devarim chapter 30. What does he say in Devarim chapter 30? After the previous parasha talks about exile and how Borei Olam is going to punish us, going out, taking us out of Israel, and we will be persecuted by our enemies, it says, right? והיה כי יבואו אליך כל הדברים האלה, הברכה והקללה, בהשבותי לבביך, after all this happens to you, the good things, the bad things, and you will come back with your heart, ושבת עד אדוני אלוהיך ושמעת בקולו, and you decide to listen to Borei Olam and listen to his word, ככל אשר אנוכי מצווך היום, אתה ובניך, everything that I tell you and your children, בשב אדוני אלוהיך את שבותיך בריחמך, בשב וכיבסך מכל העמים אשר הפיצך אדוני אלוהיך שמה. Let me read for you. It says that when you will restore your heart to our Borei Olam, Hashem will have compassion on you and will gather you again from all the nations that he scattered you. And it says, even if you have been banished to the most distant lands under the heavens, from there Hashem your God will gather you back. He will bring you back to the land that belonged to your ancestors, and you will take possession of it. Now, that is the definition of Zionism, going back to Erets Israel, going back to Borei Olam. And, you know, there is one word that is repeated here many, many times, and one rabbi took notice of this. The word that is repeated more than any other word here is the word or the verb beshavta, which means that Borei Olam will bring you back and you will come back. Now, there was a rabbi, his name was Rabbi Yehuda Bibas. He was from the city of Livorno. He was born actually in Gibraltar. Then his parents were from the city of Livorno in Italy. Then he was the rabbi of the island of Corfu. I'm talking about the year 1820, 1830. And he wrote extensively. We don't have his books, but we know that he wrote extensively about Jews coming back to Erets Israel. And he, like 60 years before Theodor Herzl, he formulated the biblical notion of Zionism. He says that the Jewish people coming back to Erets Israel is called Teshuvah. Really, he said Teshuvah, right? And this is a divine promise, as I showed to you, that is in the Tanakh. If you wish, this is collective Teshuvah. Teshuvah means return. Collective Teshuvah, returning collectively to the land of Israel. So as you see, Zionism, coming back to Israel, is part of our Torah. It was foretold to our ancestors even before they came into the land, as I read from for you in the Barim Lamed. All right. So to me, Zionism has never been like a question or something apart from Judaism. Is like my arm. What my arm is to the body, or the head is to the body, or the heart is to the body, Zionism is to Judaism. We just invented this word for different political reasons. But originally, Zionism, Teshuvah, is part of our Torah because we are not a religion, we are a nation with a land, with a language, with a history, and with a law. All right, that's a very important factor. Now, let me explain to you how these things change over the years. I just mentioned to you Rabbi Yehuda Vivas, who in 1830 he saw that the Ottoman Empire was getting weaker and weaker. You have to understand that until 1914, the First World War, Erets Israel, Palestine, belonged to the Ottoman Empire, okay, to the Turkish Empire. And the Ottoman Empire was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. As I told you, Rabbi Yehuda Vivas, he lived in the island of Corfu that belongs to Greece, and he saw the development of the Greek independence from the Turkish. Also, Greece belonged to Turkey. They were getting the independence, and he said in 1825, 1830, we need to teach our young people to fight. We need to build an army, to train an army. We have to take back Erets Israel. He talked to businessmen, he talked to investors, he talked to so many people to see if they could bring back, the Jews to Erets Israel. This is just one example. But something else happened in 1820, 1830 in Europe. Up until the French Revolution at the end of the 19th century, 18th century, at the end of the 18th century, Jews never had rights, which means Jews were never considered citizens of the country where they lived. They were something, today is something that doesn't exist. They were like a people within a people. They didn't have, they had to pay taxes as a community. They didn't pay taxes individually. They didn't have any rights. The king would decide whatever he wants to do with them. So we never had political rights in any of the countries that we lived. To a certain extent, we were theoretically okay with that because acquiring citizenship from the country that we are living in, it might imply that we are somehow sacrificing for renouncing to our citizenship, our claims to Israel. So in many cases, when Napoleon offered, for example, the Sephardic Jews citizenship, he said no. They said no. Same thing in America. At the beginning, they didn't want to pay taxes individually. They pay taxes as a community. That's why I heard. This is why you can say, for example, Polish American, African American, but somehow the first rabbis that were here, the first community leaders, they coined the term American Jews, where the the noun is Jews, is not American. So we are Jews. We belong to Eretz Israel. We are now in America. We respect, of course, America. But let me take you back to Europe, 1830, 1840. The Jews, for the first time in history, they had independence, which means they had the right to citizenship. That was something that was until now unheard. And many Jews said, well, this is the time that we have to adapt ourselves and thank our host, the French, the German, and everyone else in Europe for their hospitality in Austria and Hungary, and we need to somehow reform our religion to adapt ourselves and be welcomed by the Goyim, that they are open their arms for us, so we have to do something in return. This is when the reform movement was born. Let me rephrase it. This is when and why the reform movement was born in 1830, more or less. It was something that developed very slowly, and they started by changing, at the beginning the language. They didn't speak Yiddish, of course, no Hebrew. They spoke strictly German. So you see that one by one, you will see they are getting rid of the national political elements that make up for Judaism. But then they went also to the law, as everybody knows. They said no Brit Milah. They said we have to cancel the Brit Milah, and I'm talking about Abraham Geiger, Samuel Holdheim, and all the big reforms of 1830, 1840. They said no Shabbat. The same things that Antiochus Epiphanes said to the Jews in Hanukkah, or that the Romans forbade for the Jews said this to themselves. We have to cancel all this so we will be well received by the Goyim. We should keep just the humanistic values of Judaism, because they don't contradict anything that the Goyim also embrace. So for example, I'm going to read for you something from an article that talks about this. Marriages between a Jew and anyone of a monotheistic faith is permitted. All right, so let me read for you. The French Sanhedrin had declared that a marriage between a Jew and a Christian, which had been solemnized by a civil officer, must be considered valid. Okay. The Commission of the Conference of Rabbis reported thus: marriages between Jews and Christians, marriages between monotheists generally, are not forbidden. All right, so like from the point of view of the reform movement. But I think that many times we lose sight of what was the most important reform that the reform movement promoted. Okay, if I would have a class, I would give you some opportunity to ask. I don't know if anybody wants to answer via Zoom. What was the most important reform of the reform movement? The most important reform in their agenda is something that is kind of reasonable for the reform mindset that wants to be accepted desperately by the Goyim. They thought that the reason why the Goyim hate us, okay, they didn't understand Amalek. Amalek is unconditional. Amalek changes skins and changes the pretext. But Amalek's hatred for Jewish people is something innate. But as it happened many times, they say, oh, no, we know why the Goyim hate us. Because we have a double loyalty. How in the world they are not going to hate us if we are living in Germany, but we are praying to come back to Palestine? So, or we have this notion of a Mashiach that will take us back to the land of Israel, and then we will leave Germany. What type of Germans we are if we are saying once and again that we want to go back to the land of Israel? Okay, so this is why the Reform movement, the main thing they changed was every time that Zion, Yerushalayim was mentioned in the Siddur, they erase it completely, completely erase it. Okay, and let me read for you something that was said by them. The Jew is bound to consider that the land to which he belongs by birth and civic condition as his fatherland, to protect it and to obey all its laws, which means he cannot have any other loyalty. We do not grant, I'm quoting, we do not grant that there is such a thing as a Christian state, and certainly we should not speak of a Jewish state or of the overlapping of the religious and the political in Judaism. Let the Jewish clergyman concern himself with religious instruction. That is plain. Only let there be clearness in our religious conception. So for them, and they said something very extremely sad in 1840 that when you think about, I don't know how to mute, I don't know how to mute that. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to do it. Johnny K, I think, doesn't have the microphone mute. Hello. Okay. So they said and they declared in one of the, thank you, they declared that the following: we are, they said in 1840 in Frankfurt, we are Germans of Mosaic faith. We renounce to any romantic idea of emigrating to Palestine because we do not have any other country than our motherland, Germany. This is 1840. Okay, so imagine 100 years later what happened with motherland Germany. So let me jump a little and let me go to, so far you see what I explained to you, that originally Judaism has Zionism or Ahavat Zion, or this desire and duty to come back to Erets Israel as an integral part of its whole, of its nature. All right, we consider ourselves a people in exile, not a religion. Now, the Reform, they try to reformulate Judaism or redefine Judaism as a religion for their own agenda, but of course that was completely wrong. Now, when the Reform came to by the way, practically speaking, all the descendants, the sons of these rabbis, these Jewish leaders, in their incredible desire to become like the Goyim, they marry non-Jews and they all assimilated. Okay, but people forget that that was anti-Israel, or seeing ourselves as a religion and not without having the land, a reference to a land, was the earmark of the Reform movement. What proved to these Reform Jews that they were wrong? Well, pogroms, antisemitism. No matter how much you wanted to show yourself that you are that you do not keep anything Jewish, that you look like a German, you dress like a French, and you don't have any loyalty or allegiance to Palestine or to Israel. No matter what, they still persecuted us, and I would say like hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed in the pogroms in Russia, Ukraine, between 1850 and and 1920, even before the Shoah. Okay, hundreds of thousands of Jews in different anti-Semitic events and attacks. Okay, so let's go now to Erets Israel, 1880. Okay, by 1880, less than 25,000 Jews lived in the land of Israel. And then something happened, which is what I told you in 1880. In 1880, the pogroms became even worse in Russia. Anti-Semitism changed the landscape of Europe completely. One very famous rabbi said something very, very strong, and that might sound like politically incorrect. I'm talking about Rabbi Yitzhak Cohen Cook. Rabbi Cook, 1865-1935, he's usually viewed as, the first Ashkenazi Zionist rabbi. All the Dati Leumi camp, the religious Zionist movement in Israel, all hundreds of yeshivot, hundreds of thousands of Jews still follow their ideas, and they refer to them as the Harav, and they study his writings, etc. Okay, so he said one of the things that he said one of the most important is he could not help but see European anti-Semitism as a providential way of pushing Jews into the land of Israel. Because since 1880, Jews from Europe start coming again. Okay, so from 25,000 Jews, they start to grow and being a little more, or just a little. I want to remind you how much the Goyim loved us and tried to help us. When Theodor Herzl in 1900, he met with the Pope Pius X, and he asked him to help to end the Jewish problem and anti-Semitism. Okay, he desperately requested the support of the Pope to create a Jewish state. At this moment, it doesn't matter where, maybe in Uganda, in Entre Rios, or whatever it is. He was begging them so that the Jews of Russia could escape pogroms and a certain death. The Pope sent them a message saying the following, so I'm quote unquote, while Jews do not convert to Christianity, they cannot count with his support. So the only way that we could count with the support of the Pope, we Jews, is if we Jews convert to Christianity, to Catholicism. Now, if I have the time, I will try to explain to you a little more about this issue in the following minutes. But let's go back now to what is called the first in the modern Israeli history is called the first Aliyah, the first wave of Aliyah, of immigration, happened between 1880 and 1905. 25,000 Jews came from Europe, but other Jews came too. For example, and this is not very known, also by 1900, 2,500 Jews came from Yemen, arrived to Israel. Hello? Hello? Okay. How I do this? All right. I was saying that Yemenite Jews came also at this time from Yemen. Okay. Then the second Aliyah, 1905, 1914, another 35,000 Jews arrived to Israel. Okay, and these were Jews that were like more religious and at least nationalist. Okay, Zionism, as we know. Look, let me tell you something that probably you never heard. What is the difference, or what do they have in common? secular Zionism and reform. Reform was, in the best case scenario, religion without a state. Secular Zionism was a state without religion. Okay, so both these things were something completely artificial. I have to say, I think the main reason why Zionism was secular is because, you know, at this point, at the end of the 20th century, at the end of the 19th century, Jews were influenced by Marxism, by all these ideas that developed later into communism. So atheism was most common than religion. So this is how Zionism became something secular. But as I explained before, this Zionism was integral part of Judaism. I believe that all this Neturei Karta movement are somehow very wrongly and stupidly still trapped in the 1900s. They see Zionism as something secular, which it was. And instead of fighting within and saying, okay, as we all do, no, I mean, Israel and Torah, they have to be together. They still believe that their religious obligation is to fight Zionism. They are trapped in the 1900s. Okay. Now, as I said, another wave of immigrants, 35,000 Jews came. But I have to explain to you that at this time also, between 1900 and 1914, most Jews emigrated to other countries, especially escaping misery or poverty and persecution. Most of them immigrated to America, some of them to Australia, to England, even to Argentina. All right. Israel, let's say in 1910, Israel was part of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, and Israel or Palestine was called southern Syria. It was like a province, one of the main provinces. But and the Jews lived there under the Ottoman Empire, and there were some great benefactors. I'm talking again about 1900, 1910. There were great benefactors of that time that they helped, like Sir Moshe Montefiore or Baron Rothschild. They helped a lot. They gave a lot of money to build colonies, to organize agricultural colonies, and produce jobs for the 40, 50,000 Jews that were living in Israel at that moment. Another thing that happened that is miraculous. Like everything that pushed Israel, pushed the birth of Meirat Israel is a big, long-term miracle that we have to see it like at once, but it took many years to form. One of the biggest miracles that happened around the year 1910, 1915 is the Tehiyat HaMetim of the Hebrew language, the renewal of the Hebrew language. Hebrew was just a written language, okay? Chachamim and we all pray in Hebrew, and many people, of course, many Chachamim study the Hebrew scriptures, or the Gemara, or the Mishnah, etc., or Rambam, or the Poskim, kind of Hebrew and Aramaic together. But Hebrew in Israel was renewed and was like an incredible miracle. Modern history credits this, and I think that correctly, to Eliezer ben Yehuda. Again, he was Zionist, he was mostly secular, but he did a great thing. I remember having this conversation with a rabbi that I admire very much, Rabbi Moshe Zankot. He was from the city of Tanger, and he made Aliyah, when he was already very old, and he never wanted to take anything from Israel. was a great lover of Israel, and he showed me one of the articles he wrote, and he said that somehow the secular Zionists that built Israel, this is what this is the zechut that they have. Why are we going to take this away from them? So they did something good. They didn't do it in a complete way, but we shouldn't take this credit, this zechut from them. So it is Ben Yehuda. This is the same Ben Yehuda that you remember. You know the famous Ben Yehuda street in the heart of Jerusalem. He wrote and published articles in newspapers, motivating people to speak only in Hebrew, and he also wrote a dictionary. And the most important thing is that from 1910, in all the schools of the colonies, they taught only in Hebrew, and in all the Yishuvim and all the colonies, they made a point to speak only in Hebrew. And this is how we got this incredible miracle, because up until then, Jews, we spoke different languages. We spoke Russian and Ladino and Yiddish and Arabic, etc. Everyone brought this language from where he was coming from. Then, as I said to you, in order to be a nation, you need a land. We were having a land. We didn't have independence yet. History, we had a law, our Torah, we were fighting for that too. We are still fighting for it. And a language. So it's also something miraculous that Borei Olam did for us. A side note, I would like to say that I consider that it was a miracle within a miracle, that the Hebrew language that was adopted by the Jews, mostly Ashkenazi Jews, is Sephardic Hebrew, because modern Hebrew is Sephardic Hebrew. Ashkenazi Hebrew is Shabbos, or the Kamas is O, the Taf is S, and it's quite different from Sephardic Hebrew. It has even more vowels, diphthongs that are following mainly European languages. So they adopted Sephardic Hebrew, I think because of its simplicity, and because the Sephardim of the golden era of Spain, they were the greatest grammarians in the history of the Jewish people. So all the rules of grammar came from there. So this might have been one of the reasons why they adopted that. So for us, Sephardim is so easy because our Hebrew, we take it for granted. But the Hebrew that we use in the Tefillah and the Hebrew that we speak and that is spoken in Israel is the same Hebrew. When you think about Hasidim, they pray with one type of Hebrew and they speak with a different type of Hebrew. So you see, Sephardic Hebrew was adopted as the national language, and Baruch Hashem, as I said, this was like a miracle. But still, by 1914, there were only colonies. There was no state, and despite all the efforts, the state was not coming about. It was very poor. Israel under the Ottoman Empire was very poor. Now, the problem or the numbers, they speak by themselves. So let me tell you a very important number. Okay, millions of Jews, especially coming from Russia, over 2 million Jews, emigrated from 1860 and up until 1920 something, 1924. More than 2 million Jews emigrated to America, and they did not emigrate to Israel. Okay, but what is a little more troubling and very painful is that between 1904 and 1924, I said to you that so far we had like 50,000 Jews in Israel, half of these Jews, they also emigrated from Israel to America. Okay, so by 1914, it looked like the dream of having a state or having a place where all the Jews were coming back to um, didn't happen in Israel. It happened in New York. By then, New York had more than 1.5 million Jews. Okay, 1920, 1920 something, uh, more than 2 million Jews in America, and almost 2 million Jews in New York. Then we get to 1914. What happened in 1914? The first war took place in 1914. And one of the consequences of this terrible war was that the Ottoman Empire was defeated by the Allies, by France, Britain, Germany, Russia, etc. And the Middle East fell from the hands of the Turkish, and there is a very important agreement that took place in those days in 1916. It's called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, where France and Britain basically they divided themselves the Middle East. Okay, and like Lebanon was for France, Lebanon and Syria, and Palestine, and what is today Israel and what is today Jordan belonged, among other areas, belonged to the British. Okay, so that was a turning point in the history of Medinat Israel. You will see why in a second. Okay, I programmed the class until 7:15, but I think I'm going to continue, if you don't mind, for until 7:30 because I want to tell you something really, really important. Okay, what happened in 1916 besides the Sykes-Picot Agreement? As I said, the territory of Palestine and Jordan belonged to the British. Okay, now in 1916, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, he resigned. His name was Henry Asquith. And in his place came a different Prime Minister. His name was David Lloyd George. So what was the difference between these two Prime Ministers? Asquith was Catholic and George was evangelical, was Protestant. And there is a completely a tremendous difference between the way the Catholic Church sees the Jews and the way the Protestants, Christians, see the Jews. And you can see this even, or especially in our days. But up until then, it was impossible for Great Britain to say, yeah, we're going to give a state to the Jews. Why? Because for Catholics, for the Catholic Church, we were always a very problematic element. Our existence was a problem for them. Why? Because the whole point of the Catholic Church, of the Christian Church, is that they are founded upon the basis that they came to replace us. If they came to replace us, we shouldn't be there. What are we doing there? So for centuries, the idea was that the Jews still exist in exile to pay as a punishment for killing our God. They side. This is the famous idea of the wandering Jew. And the punishment will be that the Jews, among other things, they will be always persecuted, They will never come back to the land of Israel. As you saw, it is written in Devarim very, very clearly. Okay, they will never will allow this to happen. Okay, so for them, thinking for Catholics, thinking about the Jewish state will be with tantamount a tragedy, like something that will go against their basic religious foundations. Okay, which is true until today. Only recently, the Vatican, I mean, in the last decades, the Vatican was forced to recognize the state of Israel. Until now, they don't recognize Jerusalem. Even the present Pope. Um, by the way, I saw just a video of the Pope saying something about Shabbat, which is really incredible. It's an old video. It's not recent, but I don't know. Somehow, it was shown only now. Even the present Pope, he was not in favor, was actually very, very against America or President Trump recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And he made, and I wrote an article about it, a desperate call to all the nations to stop that. It's like he never used the word desperate. I make a desperate call to all the nations. He never used it, not for the killing of Christians in Muslim lands or for any other thing. He used this only for Jerusalem now being recognized as the capital of the Jewish state. So it is something that is very, very problematic for them. The only reason why this is not a big deal is because most people ignore this. Okay, they don't pay attention. Now, for evangelical Christians, it's a different thing. Actually, you can have two different narratives in the evangelical Christian camp. So let me mention both of them. One narrative says, well, the Jews, they need to come back to the land of Israel, so for the second coming to happen, all right? And this is one thing. And the other one that I think that is the one that many Christians in America espouse and embrace is like Mike Pence. Like it says once and again, you can see it once and again, repeating Genesis 1, 2, 3, or better said, Genesis 12, 3. It says, we are supporting the state of Israel and we support the Jewish people because Hashem in the Torah told Abraham Avinu, those who curse you will be cursed, and those who will bless you will be blessed. So listen to Mike Pence, and you will understand why only now with George Floyd was possible for England to allow a state for the Jewish people. Bezat Hashem will continue next week. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rob.